Okay. Let's see. Okay, can you see the first picture?
Yep.
Okay. Let's see. Well, there it is. Okay. So this show is really what ought to be going on right around now. And it will also cover things that will happen in the winter that you can prevent by doing things now. And so let me start by saying that this show that you're about to see will be available to you at this Student Share website. It's a Google site. And if you click on this link in the future, you can go there and find all the shows that have to do with the class, including this one, which will be called Winter Preparation. As I know you're not going to sit here and write down this email address, if you go to the Humboldt Beekeepers website and look under resources, internet resources, you will find this link, this Google Drive link, and you can access all the slideshows. And so you will find this one there. So that's an easy way to access all the shows that we do for the class. Okay, does that seem reasonable?
Yeah, I put the link in chat.
Yeah, okay. And so there it is. Okay, so here's what we're going to talk about. First, we're going to talk about what we're going to talk about. And we're going to talk about right after honey harvest, getting the hives down to size to the brood boxes only. A little bit about dealing with mites, specific to this season, making sure you have a good queen, combining weak or queenless colonies, checking for diseases, what Janine's favorite here, checking food supplies, feeding, getting small colonies through the winter, ones that aren't full size and probably don't have enough food to do it on their own. And then for review, we'll show the winter problem show, which shows what to do if you do have problems during the winter. So as the statement at the bottom is always true, no matter what time of the year you say it, what you do now determines what happens in the intermediate future, because you're trying to stay ahead of these critters and anticipate what they might do and be ready to guide them if they go off the rails. So kind of a good philosophy of life for all kinds of stuff. Okay, so honey harvest. Now, who can tell me why we ought to be harvesting honey now and not a month from now?
So you can get them treated before they start making their winter bees.
Well, you just said it about as well as it could be said. So this points out the importance of having a corgi on your team. You know, they're really low to the ground. The bees don't notice them. And so they can scurry around, do all kinds of stuff that you'd be afraid of. Okay, well, here's the deal. And it's just like you heard, that the mite population goes up slower than the bee population does, but then the bee population drops off. And right now you can have 35 mites per 100 bees, where before you only had 6, even though now you have even fewer mites than you had at the maximum, just because the bees drop off. And the other problem which makes it worse is, what about where do these mites reproduce? Right? Where?
Oh,
in the dropped brood.
Right.
What? Pupas, right? But here in the summer, they prefer male pupas. And so really, they're not doing that much harm. If your males get damaged, well, you know, big deal, right? Males are expendable. But when they stop raising drones, then what are they going to do? Where are they going to go? They're going to pile into your worker pupas, and those are the very same worker pupas that are going to try to live through the winter. So that's when your hive is gonna get knocked out. Okay, so you all know this stuff, but I'm just saying it now because we want you to do honey harvesting now and deal with the mites in the first 2 weeks of September. Later, it may be too late. Even if you deal with mites, there may be too many damaged winter bees. There may be too many viruses in them. Okay, so the first thing we do is we have taken off the honey supers. We've reduced the hives to brood boxes only. So that would mean 3 mediums, 2 larges, or a large and a medium is what works around here. So why don't we want to just have another honey super full of honey or with some honey or whatever, just because the bees are in it. Suppose you have, say, 4 mediums and there's some brood in all of them. What's wrong with that?
There's not going to be enough bees to cover the brood and they will chill.
Yes. And if they do withdraw to the bottom box, they reduce their like they usually do, they reduce their brood to the bottom box, and there's only honey up there. They're going to have the same kind of problem. They're going to have hard time keeping moisture under control in 4 mediums, and your honey box or pollen or whatever up there is probably going to get moldy partway through the winter. I had this happen to me quite a bit when I was starting, and these big slabs of pollen would just sort of like, whoops, that's too bad. So consolidate them. You may have to rearrange frames to get that stuff all packed in your brood boxes. But they'll be much happier if they can, you know, occupy their space. Sometimes you even have to take off a box during the winter if they're not occupying it and it's starting to get a little moldy. Okay, so now my hives here are at winter size, nice and cozy. Okay, so here's, so typically I would, in fact, I'm doing this right now. We did honey harvest on Sunday. So I've let the bees clean the boxes out by putting them, 100 yards away and letting them just go after the boxes. It's far enough away that it doesn't start robbing. And now the boxes are tucked away. The bees are all calm. The weather's been kind of cool, so there's nothing too exciting going on. So this would be a good time, especially if it warms up a bit, to deal with the varroa mite. So we all know how to count mites. And the limit here is about 2 per 100 on the adults. If you have 3, it's marginal. If you're doing powdered sugar, it counts about half the mites that are there. So you'd really have to get 1 or 0 to be satisfied with powdered sugar. So here's an example that Randy Oliver found when he was visiting, which is too many mites. Okay, so the chances are very high that your large hives are going to have too many mites. Okay, so here's what Janine and I are recommending for fall, this time of year, that you should count mites if you have the stuff, just for practice and just to know what's going on. But you will almost certainly find that the large colonies will have too many mites, unless you've done something during the summer, perhaps. New swarms, splits, and supersedure hives have been growing rapidly, and they may have low mite counts. the treatment of choice at this time of year is the formic acids, the Mite quick strips, or Formic Pro, because they work at 50 degrees or more during the daytime. Apigard, which is the thymol gel, it's sort of iffy right now. It's the directions say 60 or up, but the booklet says it's better at 65 and up. So right now we're having kind of a cool spell. So I had thought maybe I would do Apigard, but really I think I'm going to go and do the formic acid because I have some and the weather is pretty cool during the day. These temperatures are daytime temperatures, so for the warmest part of the day, it doesn't have to be 50 or up all night or anything like that, just during the day. Okay, so then there's this question, what if some of your hives have low mite counts and some have high mite counts? We used to say that this was a judgment call for you, but the Honeybee Health Coalition booklet really says you really ought to treat them all the same. It's quite likely if you don't treat some that the ones you don't treat will get mites who are transferring from the hives that are high. And that's just what it says. Okay, that's what I'm doing. Okay, it's still a judgment call, but I'm going with the recommendation. Anybody got any other thoughts on that? I mean, the stuff only costs $5.
Can you make that full screen, Dick?
Excuse me.
Can you make the PowerPoint or the PDF full screen?
Oh yeah, I didn't remember that. It's not, if it's not full screen for me, it's not full screen for you.
No.
Right? So I'm sorry about that. Where is, okay, it's up on the top. Okay.
Your top left.
Top left, mute, stop video, participants chat.
No, see the three buttons on the top left of your.
Mine's at the hide video, meeting info. I got the three buttons, but it doesn't say anything about that.
Yeah, hover over the three buttons. One of them will be your full screen.
Oh, I'm looking at the three dots that say more.
Yeah, the three dots on the left of your PDF window.
Let me
the three dots that can be red, yellow, or green,
oh,
but right now they don't have any color. Go for the third one.
okay, I don't have three dots here. I'm
They're getting close. Three
your
circles.
screen-
Okay, go left.
What?
Move your mouse left. There you go.
Oh,
There you
okay,
go.
way over there. Okay, yeah.
Not the X.
Nope,
Nope.
no, not
Nope.
the X.
Next
Okay, the
one.
minus,
Not
Go
that
right.
one.
Oh,
not that one. Okay, the third one.
That one.
Okay, it's tiny. Okay. Okay, got it. Okay, that thing at the top ought to be going away.
There you go. Now you just hit the arrow buttons.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay, are you getting the top of your screen blocked off by directions?
Nope.
Nope,
Looks good.
okay, it's working for you. Okay, how about that?
Looks great.
Okay, great. Thanks for bringing that up. It's been a while. Okay, so anybody got thoughts on treating all or just some?
Treat them all.
Treat them all, okay. And might be a good time to mention that that I have an entire box of 30 of Formic Pro, and if anybody wants to buy some, a few at a time, it would be $5 a piece. I do this because, well, it's cheaper that way. And I like to have some handy for people so that it's easy for them to get it and use it instead of just buying a few at a time. So unfortunately, we're not at an in-person meeting, so I can't just be handing them out like party favors.
Well, that's a really
Okay,
good
so-
price because they cost $6 if you buy them online.
Yeah, well, you know, we got the 10% March Madness discount from Man Lake is what we did.
Oh, good
Okay,
job.
so just to review, daytime temperatures 50 to 85, it's organic, blah, blah, blah. Gets tracheal mites, works great. And our temperatures now are not so high that you're going to blast them out of the hive or kill queens unless your queens are quite weak. The other one is the Apiguard, which works like this. And if it would just be nicer during the day, this should be very good too. This one takes a longer time. It's like a 2-week, apply 2 weeks apart. So it's really like a 3 or 4 week treatment. So considering the weather for the next 3 weeks, you never know, you know, it's really starting to look wintry. The red maples here are starting to turn a little red around the edges. So we mustn't forget to make sure that our treatments worked. I think we've seen, you know, we're over past years, the mites have been pretty persistently reproducing into fall because of our nice weather. And I know, you know, we know in several, you know, cases where people have had to really redo things because the mite level just did not go down. Okay, and also bring to your attention that we just discovered that this booklet from the Honeybee Health Coalition has a new edition, August 1st, 2022. So, so you should get this, go to the website and download it. It will also be at the Student Share site that you can download it from there. I haven't put the latest one on there yet, but I will do it right away. Also at the Student Share, we have class shows about Varroa. We have 2 class shows on Varroa mites, which you might want to review if you've forgotten all about them. They won't forget all about your bees, you can be sure of that. Okay, so the third thing is checking your queens. Make sure you have a good queen going into winter. We're sort of at a, you know, a good time to do that is a couple of weeks, 2 or 3 weeks after you do your mite treatment, because you might occasionally kill off a queen, especially if you have an older or weak one. This has happened to me. I think it's happened to Janine. I think it's probably happened to most people who've done this. Yeah, Hank. But it's only happened to me to queens that were 2 years or older. The young ones seem to do it just fine. But it occasionally happens, and you don't want to go into winter with a queenless hive. So hopefully, if you had failing or old queens, you requeened when you could buy them in August, and now going into winter with good, solid, healthy young queens. In fact, that's a very good reason to do requeening in the middle or later in summer. Typically, right under the treatment, you'll find some blank spots in your brood nest. Pupas don't seem to be affected, but there may be larvae and eggs missing. Maybe larvae missing right around the formic acid. And that sort of brings up a little problem. You're supposed to be looking to see if your queen is making a nice pattern, but your mite treatment has disrupted the pattern. So what you so you should be seeing this upper right-hand picture where it's nice and solid. You should be not seeing this spotty pattern in the lower left. It means there's something not there. Now, if you did this 2 weeks after, if you looked, say, 3 weeks after treatment, then your queen who has survived the treatment, there may not be this really solid looking blocky pattern right underneath the formic probe because the queen may have not been laying for 3 or 4 or 5 days, but you should see a nice pattern of eggs. Typically, queens really take off after the treatment, and you typically see a nice vigorous egg laying pattern afterwards. Okay. Any questions, any comments or questions or anything on the mite treatment and having a good queen? Does anybody know if queens are available right now?
Yes, queens are available. I know at least from Oliveira's, queens are available for, they're pricey, $41.75 a piece, and the shipping is $39.75, but they'll do free marking up to 10 queens, and beyond that it's $1.75. I think New World Carniolan may also have queens still available, and Oliveira's only has Carniolans available.
Are these from Hawaii?
No, California.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, usually queens get they get less expensive as summer goes on, but maybe not in this particular case.
Dick, may I had something that the difference between the mags and the formic pro, they're both made by the same company, but mags have almost 48% formic acid. The formic pro has 42%. The mags will definitely kill the mites. They're definitely, if you have a real mite population, it will really knock the mites out, but there's a good chance it will kill an old queen. Whereas the formic pro is slower releasing, 14 days versus 7 days. It's not so hard on the queen, but you might not kill enough mites. So my experience is that if you have a real bad infestation, the max will definitely knock the mites out, but it might kill your old queen. So with the formic pro, you got to follow up. Sometimes it don't kill all the mites.
Yeah, very good point. And also a similar point is that you can choose to do it over single pads over a longer period, one after the other, or both at once. And I'm thinking with the weather the way it is, that both at once might be the best thing right now, especially if you're using Formic Pro, which has, like Hank says, less of an immediate hit. Would you think that's right, Hank?
Yeah, I think so. Like I said, though, but if you have a real bad infestation, I usually try to use the mags in the spring, because if I kill a queen, I get a new one, and I use Formic Pro in the fall, but I do follow-up testing.
And how has it been when you follow up? Does it usually do the job?
Well, last year we had because of the good fall weather, we actually I had to treat them again. Because the mite population didn't go down because we had such good weather, which but the climate change here, I don't know, but last fall, the mite population definitely stayed on longer.
Yeah, I think for the last 3 years, I think, well, I don't know about this the last one, but the University of Oregon beekeeping put out a notice that mites were more severe because of having nice fall weather, where mites are more active and reproduce more, and bees are producing brood longer, maybe producing drones over a longer period of time. So yeah, so it's always different. Climate change or no, it's every season is different. So you kind of, like the saying goes, you can learn, you can observe a lot by just looking. So you got to look.
Also, if you're going to use the max strips and you use 2 pads, you better have another honey super and escape for them go, because they will definitely want to escape that forming. Yeah, I learned that the hard way. First year, I put 2 pads down on a single brood box, and boy, I panicked. I immediately took the pads off because they were bearding and they were trying to get out of there real quick. So, make sure if you use 2 max strips that you have an escape form.
Yeah. In fact, that's a good reminder. I've got some honey supers that didn't get used this year, so they've been stored, and I'm going to put those on as escape chambers. That way the bees can kind of tidy them up, get rid of any wax moths that might be in there, and kind of clean them up. Even though I'm going to take them off again and store them, it's good to have your honey supers on the hive once a year, whether they're actually being used for honey or not. Also, I noticed a difference in the directions this year. The MAQS, which, like Hank says, has a more intense vaporization at first, it recommends having, if you have a bottom board slider, it recommends having it out. And for the Formic Pro, it recommends having it in.
And that kind of Danielle Warman has a question about closing the bottom of the hive with Max. So hopefully that answered her question, but I hope that she'll speak up.
I was asking that question. It's one of those ask a beekeeper, a bunch of beekeepers, 10 questions and you get 11 answers. I've been told like every scenario, do you put the board back in for half the time, the whole 7 days, or not at all?
Yeah, well, the directions only has one answer.
Great.
So, so I think what with the climate, some of that is finessing to get, if you see, what did it go? It said it goes to 86. Many places in the country here, what did it say?
85.
85, yeah, are hotter than that right now. And so I have a feeling that a lot of these, playing with the bottom board business is for how to use this treatment when it's hot.
I agree.
Thank
Because
you.
most places it is hot.
But when
Thank
it's 62 degrees out max and only for an hour, it's probably not going to have the fumigation, the strong fumigation effect that it does in the warmer climate.
Yeah. Now, as a chemist, I can tell you that as the temperature goes up, evaporation goes up rapidly. It's not a straight line curve, it goes up fast. So since it's so important, any other comments, questions about the dreaded varroa mite and what to do? Okay. Queen problems. I think some of us experienced people would agree that after honey harvest, after they've been gathering honey and doing whatever all summer, and we've been kind of ignoring them because there's so many honey supers piled up, that we discover some things about queens. If we haven't looked for a while, that you might have a queen failure. You might have a queen that's gone non-laying. You might have a queen that disappeared, and you may have had, say, a swarm earlier on. You may have made a split in which you intended for them to raise a new queen, and maybe that worked and maybe it didn't. So it is possible that you've lost a queen somewhere along the line, or a new queen hasn't made it. And so you might have queen problems to deal with. And one common result of that is that you might have laying workers. Now, we're going to use that as a quick example, but if at our Google sharing site, there is a show called queens.pdf, which goes through all the possibilities of queen failure of various sorts and what to do about it. And that's beyond our mission right now. But using, say, a queen failure, disappeared queen as an example, after 4 weeks, your brood's going to be gone, and the pheromones that suppress the workers' ovaries are going to not be there. These are circumstances where this might happen. Supersedures in summer are pretty common. Okay, the new queen's got to go out and mate. Black phoebes are out there looking for queens to eat. Any number of things could happen. Queen may fail and died, or she may still be there, but just not laying, which makes it a little tricky. And then the second two things, well, we need not really go into that in any detail. Okay, so if you do have the laying workers, this is what happens. So these are things that you would do. Now we're getting to what you would do now if you discover this. The easiest thing is if you have other hives, if you have a bee yard with more than just this one hive in it, is just dump the bees out and let them find other hives. Combine, or you can combine with the strong queen-right colony. You can do the fly home method into a queen-right colony. You take the laying worker hive away, say 20 or 30 feet, move a queen-right colony into its place, shake the bees out and let them fly home into the queen-right one, which has all the right pheromones, all balanced, all nice, and the laying workers will feel discouraged and will stop. But that's also, the details are beyond our mission today also. So this is just a reminder of that you can deal with this if you should discover it. Okay, so number 4 on the list. Oh, any questions, comments on the queen problems at this time of year? Okay, nothing's more secure than going into winter and spring with nice, good queens. In fact, I prefer to requeen in late summer, and that can avoid any kinds of queen failure or queen problems in early spring when your bees are starting to build up and maybe it's not April yet and you can't buy queens yet. So better to go through with a strong queen into spring than to go through with a failing queen into spring and have to do something about it right when you're already got lots else going on. Okay, so supposing you've got hives that didn't perform very well for whatever reason, didn't produce honey, they have spotty brood pattern, their queens are still okay, but they're not that okay. Supposing you have ones that have low population, you can combine these with strong hives. You can, you know how to combine hives. This is just a reminder that this is something you would do. It's not all the details. Okay, in the big picture is that you would do this, which you all really know about. And this is a picture of it in process. Okay. Any questions about or comments about combining hives? Not only how you do it, but strategy of when you'd want to do it, or cases where you think it's a good idea or not, or anything like that. Okay, it's pretty easy, pretty much always works. Okay, so of course, just like you always do when you're going into the brood area, particularly, you would be checking for diseases. And the booklet to have for this is this one, which is not upgraded recently, but it is 2016, and it is also free from this source. And it is also at the student sharing website, and you can download it directly from there. And the class show diseases, which covers everything except for varroa mites, is there, which gives a slideshow, an explanation of the other diseases and what the Humboldt or the Cal Poly Humboldt B class thinks one ought to do. But we basically follow this booklet. Okay, so some of these diseases you're not likely to find. You're not likely to find European foul brood. You're not likely to find shock brood. Some of the others, like nosema or tracheal mites, you can't see anyway. Tracheal mites probably taken care of by your formic acid treatment. But the European, why wouldn't you find shock brood and European foul brood at this time of year? Why are you not so worried about it? Okay, Janine.
Well, because we're coming off of a time of good sunny weather and abundant nutrition
Yeah, and they are usually found when?
in the spring,
Yeah,
early, when
Yeah.
the colony is weak and suffering from poor conditions of not enough ventilation, too much moisture in the hive, and not good nutrition.
yeah. So under stress brings stress.
Yes.
Good weather, bad weather, good weather, bad weather. Oh dear. So the main thing you would be able to check for is American foul brood, which really can pop up at any time of year. It's not very common, but it's bad news if you get it. And as Janine has been explaining, it has not gone extinct. It does pop up from time to time. And as long as you're going into winter with healthy hives, you would be checking for this. Here are the basic facts about it, which you sort of all know already, but I'll give you a moment to review.
Well, 70+ years. I've never seen that number.
Oh, I've seen all kinds of numbers.
Yeah, Dewey Karen says 80 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen 80.
Wow.
So presumably somebody got some old stuff, equipment out of a museum and tested it. It's probably gone up because of testing for spores has become a lot easier and more sensitive. And so, anyway, longer than we can worry about. I mean, I'm not going to be here in 70 years. Okay, so this is the usual thingy.
Ick.
I might say that the parasitic mite syndrome caused by the mites and viruses can have very similar looking pattern to this, but it won't do the stretchy goo test. And if you're at all in doubt, here's what you can do. And this we have exercised especially Janine, has helped people exercise this pathway, haven't you?
I have.
And are they pretty on it over there at the ag office?
Yes, although David has been out in the field quite a bit lately, and it can take a couple of days to reach him. But once he does make contact, then he's on it.
Okay. Do you have a test kit yourself that somebody could use?
No, I just go to David and bring the sample.
I
Okay.
always have them. I have AFB and EFB test kits.
Okay, that's Eric.
Part of my kit, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I have an AFB test kit, and I don't think either of us would mind if somebody comes to us with some kind of possible emergency.
Perhaps I should have one.
Yeah, I mean, it should be a get on it immediately.
Right, I know it's, I'm so price conscious. It's like $16.95, and it's like, that's a lot of money.
And they do expire, don't they?
They do expire. They're only good for about a year.
Yeah, they're probably better than that, but really, you'd want to really be sure.
Well, I know that one expired test did work,
Mhm.
but yeah, expiration date.
Yeah. Anyway, that's enough about that. I think Janine covered it before we got on here. Okay, now this one's really important. It's they just got to have enough food, and you never know. Your hive may not have enough food just because maybe it didn't gather enough. Maybe it was a later swarm or split, and they didn't have time to do this. Maybe it's going to be warm in November, and they're going to raise more babies and use up more food. That's what's happened in the last couple of years. This tells you about how to tell if they have enough. So if they have, if they have the brood boxes, 3 mediums, large and medium, or 2 larges, and the top box or box and a half or 2 are full of honey, well, that's probably good. So you might as well feed 2 to 1 sugar water, so they can, and you should feed it now rather than wait, because when the weather is warmer, they can process this stuff. They can go through the dehydration and splitting of the complex sugar down, because they're warm enough to move around and work. If you wait till it's like 44 all the time, they're going to have a little harder time with it. So I am personally not recommending, I'm recommending the the usual upside down jar feeder with the holes right above the cluster. I'm not recommending other types of feeders. I'm not recommending dry sugar or fondant. And that is kind of me being opinionated, but it's also based on some experience. I know dry sugar and fondant are popular with some people, but I've done tests where I've put fondant and sugar water right side by side in the hive, and they take the sugar water, I think the number was about 8 times as fast as the fondant. I haven't tried dry sugar. Those things are really recommended for where it's like gets really pretty cold, because if it's below about 40 or high 30s, they can't deal with cold sugar water. But on the other hand, in order to use fondant or dry sugar, they have to get water to dissolve it. And getting water when it's that cold is really not a very happening thing. So those things can keep them from starving, but they're not the best for actually building up a whole bunch of cells full of, well, let's call it fake honey, but not that great at building up a supply in a hurry.
Dick, are you open for discussion on that? Because I've been
Yeah.
using fondant on the coast, and I find you're right, the sugar water, they take it, but my nukes, they love a patty of fondant, and moisture is not a problem here on the coast. I mean, in
Well-
Arcata, the moisture they have there on top of a nuke box, they love the fondant. I have had very good success with them. So,
Okay.
and so that's just my opinion. The bigger colonies get sugar water, but my nukes all get fondant, and I have a woman in Oregon that sells me excellent lemongrass fondant with essential oils, and my bees love that stuff. They go through a patty sometimes in 2 weeks.
Well, 2 weeks. Okay. What does your patty weigh?
I know they're about 6 inches or 8 inches by 8 inches, and about
Okay,
a half
so
an
a
inch.
couple of pounds.
Yeah,
Well, I might say that a couple of pounds in 2 weeks is pretty trivial when you're compared to 3 pounds of sugar water per day, which they can easily do.
like I said, the big colonies get the sugar water, but my nukes all get fondant patties, and they seem to work for me.
Okay. Works for Hank. I haven't
Another-
done what he did. I have not used them on nukes.
So Dick, another great usage for fondant is if you've got hungry hives and you can't get somebody to help. Fondant is great if you need to leave town for like a month.
Mhm.
I do 10-pound candy boards,
Okay.
and those work great for those situations.
Yeah. Okay. So it won't keep them, it'll keep them from starving, but it probably won't, they probably won't accumulate very much. But if your purpose, like you just said, is to keep them from starving. So yeah, it can go over a long period of time, which is actually a plus of saying it's kind of, they take it slowly. And also remember that when you say they need moisture to dissolve it, they actually need water. It's not just high humidity. High humidity doesn't really dissolve it. They actually need water. Anyway, so, I guess the bottom line is that there are these different methods of feeding, and we haven't even talked about types of feeders. So whatever you do, pay attention, see how it works, and make comparisons. And see what works. They're all tools that have their use at the proper time. And so I'm not going to say always do such and such like this. This is what I like. But there are other circumstances. There are circumstances where something different might be just fine. I like these because they're free, and fondant's kind of a pain to make. Okay, just a little review on it. Okay, now Hank brought up getting splits or nukes or small colonies through the winter. It's kind of a good idea to make splits in the summertime. Your bees have already they have a large population. They may have, it's a good time to raise your own queens. But they're not likely to become large and store 50 pounds of honey. And even if you have small colonies, this is my experience, is that getting even a nuke through the winter is not that hard, but I just have to keep food in there pretty much all the time. And maybe other people would agree. They need to produce quite a bit of heat. They do a lot of heating, they're inefficient heating wise. And so, but they can really produce heat if they have lots of food.
And it
So-
helps if you place two nucs together because they keep each other warm if they're side by side, and then you just strap them together.
Yeah, or even make one of those boxes where it's a 10-frame box, but it has a divider down the middle.
And
I haven't
Eric,
done that, but that kind
Eric-
of thing would be great.
Eric made me two of those.
Ah,
I'm going to be using them this winter.
mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really good.
Thank you, Eric.
Yeah, talk to Eric. You can even have them have the entrances facing in opposite directions so they don't get confused with each other. That's probably what you would do. Or on different opposite sides or something. Okay, so here's just a simple of what I do. I use a pint jar rather than a quart because I don't want the sugar water to sit in there too long. If it isn't used up in 4 or 5 days, it may start getting moldy. I like to change it. I like to have them use it up and then add more. It doesn't have to be in there constantly because they will store it, but you know, it's not like they're building comb or anything. But I do keep it in there pretty constantly, and then I keep an eye on it to see if, you know, if they are raising brood and expanding, they may need to move into a full-size box at some point. Okay, so other fall things, we're all getting close to done here, are these things. It may be your hive may not be in the best place if you are a new beekeeper and you haven't learned where the winter sun is yet, but you can move them if you really think it's worth it. I use mouse guards because my bees are right next to a field, and it's, you know, before I did this, it was pretty common for meadow vole to move in, start chewing up comb. The bottom board sliders, we talked about that, but I found it is a problem. People do have a problem if you have them in, that they don't check them all winter, and the stuff that accumulates on them gets wet and starts getting rotty, and then the bottom board slider itself starts getting rotty because it's kind of wet and covered with soggy stuff. So if you do leave it in, which I think is a good idea, do scrape them off every couple of weeks. Okay, so so I'm skipping here to a picture show that we use in the class, and it's kind of a review for this talk and may add a few things too. But it does cover what do you do if your winter precautions fail and you do have to deal with some of these problems. So first, this is what you're normally doing in the winter. Okay. Okay. This is the one I hate the most because I always could have done something about it. How many of you have had your hearts break when this happens to you?
Oh yeah, I have.
Oh yeah. Janine, that hasn't happened to you, has it?
Unfortunately, I had an out apiary hive, and you know, I thought the people that were there were watching them, and I had this case. It happened with the Italians and not with the Carniolans.
Mm-hmm. See, plenty of pollen, but no honey.
Ugh.
And it's often your strongest hives, especially Italians, that you really had high hopes for. You're going to split this hive into 4 parts and sell each one of them for $200. And now look at it. So I'm going out. I just did the honey harvest, brought them down to brood box side. I'm going to go out with my little full scale and weigh all the hives. See if anybody's weak and start dealing with it right away if they are. This is my little full scale method, which okay, so if this does happen to you, here's what you have to do. At least you won't have to worry about honey fermenting when you store your frames, because there won't be any. But pollen will. So if you can move the pollen into other hives, that would be a good way to use the pollen.
Hey, Dick, is that
Yeah.
is 30 pounds, is that a fast rule? 30 pounds for 2 boxes or 1 box?
Oh, 30 pounds for 1 medium box is a
Heck,
good
I've
number.
always heard that a medium was 60 pounds. I didn't realize it was only 30 because a deep is 90.
60, well, that's including the box.
Oh, okay.
I have done some weighing, and 9 frame, which will weigh more than a 10 frame full of honey. I've weighed full 10 framers at 65. Okay, and I've weighed empty box with a wet combs, after extracting at about 15 to 20. So if you took 16 and subtracted 6, if you took 65 and subtracted 20, you'd be at 45. But I found that it's a rare brood box, a medium or large, that's full of honey all the way to the edge. Usually the outer facing one is a little sparse or don't. I mean, that's the sort of the coldest part. And so it won't be totally stuffed. So I'm using the figure 30 pounds as a conservative figure for what a medium box of honey can hold. Usually in a 10 frame, if you have in a medium, there'll be a little space cleared in the middle for the queen to lay, even if she's not doing it. Things like that. So if a 3 frame medium, I would like to see, a 3 mediums hive, a 3 mediums high. I'd like to see the top one full of honey and the second one be at least half full of honey. Make sense?
Yes.
I had a question. So one of your slides in the beginning was talking about just overwintering with just brood boxes. But if
Yeah.
you're trying to give them honey to last through the winter, so I have some, the hives that produce honey have enough that I'm leaving, but as they backfill, how much honey, how many resources do they add and wait between, honey harvest and, winter?
Oh, you mean that they actually gather from out there?
Yeah, because they move the brood down and they really backfill the top of the frames.
Yeah.
I'm wondering how much extra weight they accumulate between, honey harvest and winter.
Well, I would suggest you use one of those pull scales and check it out. Now, in my experience, they don't gain anything. And if the weather is really nice, well, that sort of has a double-edged to it, because
Consume
they'll
more,
keep
yeah.
raising babies. They'll be able to gather more nectar, but they'll be able to raise babies, and the population will be high. Like some of my hives are really stuffed right now. So I can't really answer that except to say that in later, say in towards later September and into October, the temperatures are down. Like today was gloomy here pretty much all day, and the workforce was not out in numbers. And so if it's warm enough to raise babies and cool enough that they can't fly in large numbers, the amount of storage, the amount of stored honey will decrease. So backfilling will not happen.
Right.
So, if you can, and this might be something that I would advise, but I haven't actually done, is during honey harvest, keep a super full of honey unextracted. And then when things settle down in the fall, have that honey available to put into hives that need it, especially hives that have mediums as brood boxes, which I'm tending to have. And then you can slide those right in. It's also possible to move full frames from honey supers down into the brood boxes before you do your honey harvest, like late summer, anytime in late summer.
Huh. Thank you.
So hope that helps. It's kind of a it depends kind of thing. It depends on, you got to keep track of what they're doing and what the weather's like and how big the population is and so on and so forth. And you and I, we'll always learn something new, and we'll try to fine tune our practices. So then there's this nasty little scenario, which those of us who check out other people's hives during the winter or spring, we see this really pretty often.
Mhm.
Can happen pretty darn quick. So we already talked about the mites. We already talked about the population curves. Here's another version of it. Up here where the red line, the mite red line goes up over the danger level, October, September, that's when all your new workers are getting the hell beat out of them by viruses. And so we just don't want that. So same old thing here, same stuff. But the one thing that we didn't mention was the oxalic acid, because this is something like, how many of you have come to do this in the wintertime as sort of a normal thing?
I do.
I do. Janine does. I know that. She's looking at Facebook right now.
No, I'm thinking, oh, oxalic acid is not approved for use in California. It's approved for use in the other 49 states.
Yeah. Anyway, and this is the kind.
And Dick is thinking, well, you just need to know why things are not allowed and when it's appropriate to break rules.
Yeah, well, I'd say it's not allowed because of bureaucratic inertia and other red tape things.
And I'd say you're probably right.
Because it's not toxic to everything when it's not approved, and all of a sudden becomes a good thing as soon as it's approved.
But I can say that it does pose a hazard to the beekeeper that's applying it. It's harder on the beekeeper than the bees. So wearing the right kind of respirator is absolutely essential in order to avoid respiratory damage.
I'm being quiet here. Okay, and there is the dribbling method as well. Okay, so why do we do this in December or January? Besides the no temperature requirement?
Less brood.
Yeah, and so what's wrong with having a bunch of pupas in there when you do this?
It's like brood is like kryptonite to oxalic acid.
Kryptonite?
Yeah, it just can't go there.
Yeah, oh, it can't go in. It doesn't affect anybody inside. Yeah, and where are all the mites? In the
They're
pupas,
all-
right?
So the mites on the bees are called phoretic, right?
Right.
And what's the term for the mite in the cell? I can't remember.
Ooh,
Boundless.
Foundress.
yeah. That
There's
means
John.
they're founding new dynasties in your pupas. And so, around here, many hives will not stop raising brood, especially Italians, they'll keep on going, but it'll be at a very reduced amount. And so, oxalic acid will be, fairly effective, even in the winter here, if it's not, especially January, late December and January, where it really does get kind of cold. There's been some recent study published in probably the Bee Journal, but maybe the other one, testing, was this a Randy Oliver thing, testing multiple applications of oxalic acid during the winter, and found out that multiple applications weren't that effective. Anyway, they're still trying to work out this oxalic acid thing, but I think a lot of us here think that doing a fumigation or possibly a dribble in the middle of winter is a good thing. So so many times you can see a mite collapse starting, and this would be a good thing to do if you see it starting. The population's still high, but the brood nest is looking ratty. And if you do a test of some sort, you'll find a high mite count. So this is something you can do. If the temperature is over 50 during the day, which is really not that uncommon during the winter here, you can use the Mite Away quick strips or the Formic Pro if you have a pretty high population. They say you need 6 frames of bees or more, or else it's just too damaging. And you might use 1 strip, that kind of thing, but it works really fast, and that's what you want. The Apivar is a more, what you call a hard chemical. We're trying not to use those things. It's one of the ones that will accumulate in the wax. As an emergency measure, it's still an option. Let's just put it that way. In an emergency situation, nothing you'd want to use regularly, I don't think. So supposing your hive does collapse, you would want to seal it up to prevent robbing, because not having them rob it, well, you say maybe that's okay, the other hives can use the honey. There may be some mites roaming around there, or some bees hanging out in there, which might be covered with mites. But mostly you don't want them to get into robbing and start robbing each other, if you have multiple hives in your bee yard. You can reuse the resources after the mites die off. There's nothing wrong with it. I would always uncap, if I'm going to reuse these frames, I would uncap the dead brood just so the bees don't have to do it. It's a judgment call whether you're going to take one like this and renew the foundation and start over again. I probably might do that, especially by springtime when you want frames like this. This dead brood is going to be not very palatable. Okay, so the last thing that covering here, and this seems to happen, pretty common. You just get this, early spring, late spring, early winter, the bee population in this colony just starts going down. And beekeepers have been complaining about this for hundreds of years. They called it spring dwindling or any number of other names. And the causes are, who knows, right? Maybe those tracheal mites are out of control. Maybe nosema is out of control, especially the new kind, where they don't poop all over the place and give you any clues. It's just, it seems like once it gets, once the hive gets to a certain size, a size of smallness that is, they just can't keep it warm enough to build up the population. The babies can't be kept warm enough. The brood nest is too small. So what are you going to do? Okay. And keeping in mind that the carniolans and rushes do have small winter clusters. And if their winter cluster looks healthy, it's maybe only, 3 frames of brood. It's probably just fine. Okay, but if it gets smaller than that, you can bump off the queen and combine them with another hive. It's not going to do another hive very much good, but if they have resources like pollen and nectar, pollen and honey, it could do the other hive some good. But you might want to save the queen. If the queen seems like she was good, she wasn't failing, she did well during the summer. This is something I have been doing, I know Janine's been doing, and probably other people. It's like, let's save the queen. I mean, why let them die out, right? And so saving the queen. So here's what we have done. We caged the queen. Maybe just shake out the other hive, shake the bees out on the ground on a warm day, let them move in with another hive. Okay, so then from a large hive, I can make a nuke, 5 frames. Has to be a large enough hive that they're not going to miss 5 frames. I can take frames from the weak hive and swap them in there. Okay, so I can make a nuke. I can introduce the queen the normal way, the caged queen way. Keep the feed going so that this nuke can stay warm, and then let the queen out and treat it like a nuke colony in the winter. And hopefully, if the queen is good and you keep feeding it, and those bees that you made the nuke with don't have too many viruses, they'll expand their population. The queen now has plenty of workers to help her, and you'll have a nice little colony in the spring. So here's a picture where I was actually doing this, and it worked out. This is the top of the cluster, it looks pretty good. And that's the last picture that I have for you. So I hope that all of your winter hives do well, or at least most of them, and that you will anticipate problems and be prepared if there are any. So any discussion or other things?
So that's a split that you did in the fall. Is that what you're saying? So that was a queen that you wanted to keep in the fall, and then you did a split and introduced her before winter.
Oh,
Is that what you said?
You mean what I was just talking about, or back
Yeah,
there
what you're
in the
just talking about.
slideshow always? This is an emergency if during the winter or early spring, if a hive starts dwindling in numbers and can't turn itself around.
Oh, okay, I got you.
Okay, so this is an emergency maneuver that you can do to save the queen and start a nuke from bees from a large colony if you have a large colony. I've found that if I have typically, 6 to 8 colonies through the winter, that a couple of them are going to be gangbusters. It's probably a good reason to keep a few Italians, because these hives will be, if they don't run out of food, they're probably going to be large. They'll be monster hives in early spring. So they're useful for providing bees for this purpose. And also they're useful for making splits in, say, April, when you can buy bees, you can sell nukes, you can make splits for yourselves. And you need big, strong, healthy, oversexed hives to do it at that time of year here on the coast. So I'm not saying that the Carniolans and Russians can't build up rapidly too, but the Italians are more likely to have extra bees in late winter.
But Dick has often said you want Italians in the spring and Carniolans, Russians in the fall.
Right. Yeah. And we're hoping that Saskatraz will be that, but so far we haven't tested enough to prove it to ourselves. I've tried Saskatrazes, and I'd say they were pretty good, but there were some failures. I just don't have the numbers to do statistics.
I know
But-
it would be fun to do an experiment.
But I would, if, let's say that that the bee club or any group was buying bees in summer this year from Oliveras, I would have ordered a couple of Saskatrazes. But that didn't happen.
Right. And there's always, it would be good to have resource colonies, because somebody's always going to need a queen, even if it's a placeholder queen to keep their colony going until they can get a spring queen.
Yeah. Now, typically I would have made 2 or 3 new colonies in August, and had bought queens, perhaps Saskatraz queens, and kept them going through the winter. I would probably make colonies, not new colonies, I'd probably make splits using an entire medium box. So they wouldn't be that small. And then they could be on hand in case of queen failures during the winter, make nice hives in the spring. But I didn't do that this year because I was gone a lot of August, and nobody was doing queen orders in August. And my bees raised, I think probably 5 out of 8 raised new queens this year locally that seemed to be doing very nicely. And so I thought, well, this year I'm just not going to worry about it. I have enough hives that if any queens fail, I can combine them with others, and I feel pretty secure.
So, Dick, there was one question about saving the cage queen 3 days prior to introducing. I'm assuming she's in the nuke, right?
Well, what you said isn't quite right. It's when I take her out of the failing colony and cage her right away, and put her into the nuke caged right away.
Right.
Yeah. And do the usual introduction where I, wait 3 days,
That's
see if the bees like her, double check for queen cells, because when I make the nuke up, I'm going to put brood in there, and there's going to be some eggs and small larvae. So it is possible that they would start making queen cells. Not so likely because it's middle of winter. but I want to go through the same routine that I do introducing a queen to a small colony any time of year.
And therefore, the sugar water. To,
Yeah, they like that when they're getting a queen introduced. And the new colony, you know, I try to put in some frame or two of honey, but I would always put in some sugar water when introducing a queen, especially in the winter where they're not getting any from outside.
but just a small jar, so it isn't like an ice cube over them.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah.
Angela has her hand raised.
Yeah, I have a kind of a question scenario, like what would you do situation. So I'm in Fortuna. It was last year, it was pretty warm. There was a day in January, it was 70 degrees. I was doing yard work. And I have Italians, they plowed through their stores over the winter. So I was feeding them and they just kept growing and growing and growing. What do you do in a situation like that where it's a warm winter, you got hungry bees, they're growing, is it just a constant early spring type management in that situation?
Well, well, first of all, it is possible to overfeed in the sense that they have enough to live through any say week of bad weather. So you'd want to keep track in the hive, and if they have enough to go through a bad spell, you may want to stop feeding, because if they're constantly fed, say from an early time, they'll think it's spring and they will just grow and grow. This is what beekeepers, commercial people do in order to get large colonies for almond pollination in February. Normally they aren't that big in February, and it's best if ours are, don't think it's springtime in February. So that's one thing. Don't just feed without knowing if they have enough or not. Another thing is to, check the bottom box. Sometimes it looks like they're just going nuts, but when you look at the bottom box, it's empty. They've moved up. And so then you'd want to take the bottom box, move it up on top so that they can grow into that. And the population was not as overcrowded as you thought it was. And you can do that several times in early spring and keep them from feeling overcrowded and wanting to swarm and all that. So that's
Okay.
another thing to watch out for. Another thing you can do is take some frames of brood out and swap them with other colonies that aren't doing so well.
Awesome, thank you.
So those
So if
things
they
you-
are growing, they are filling their boxes, just make sure they just have enough for about a week at a time. That would be a good,
Yeah, well, I would
Okay.
err on the side of plenty just because a big hive, does use it up pretty fast.
Although
Thank you.
I think a little bit of sporadic feeding, not constant feeding, may be of value there too.
Yeah, and you may want to say switch to fondant and put that on there if you think it's heavy enough, right? But you're not really sure. You might want to use some fondant because they'll take that slowly. I don't think that stimulates brood raising the way that sugar water does.
thank you.
So, and also say if I want to make splits if I want to put queens in splits in the middle of April when the queens arrive, I started to make my splits earlier than that, say almost, maybe up to a week before, especially if my hives are getting kind of bulgy. And then, of course, they'll make queen cells. And then you can when you get the queens, you can bump off the queen cells and introduce the queen. You'll be a week ahead with the nucs, and you can be sure that they can't raise more queen cells because they won't have any eggs or larvae that are young enough to do it.
They're gonna have a question, and Janine too, that have good experience with bees. If you overfeed your bees in the winter time and they don't eat their stores, is that a trigger for swarming?
It
If they're
can
too
be,
well fed?
yes.
Oh, well, if they get, being well fed is one thing and being overcrowded is another. But being well fed early can lead to overcrowding, like we just discussed. And so the fact that they're well fed, well, that's nice. The fact that they're reproducing like crazy, well, you have to manage that.
Plus they don't eat their stores, so there's less room for the queen to lay in the spring, correct? If you keep feeding them, they don't eat the reserves, they just drink the sugar water and they don't empty their stores, so there's less room for the queen to lay, correct?
Well, it is possible for them to get brood bound, honey bound, and not be warm enough in the spring to build new comb too.
well, I would say that if you have, say, 3 mediums as brood boxes, and you think you might be a little low on food and you start feeding, they're at that time of year, their brood cluster isn't going to be very big. So I would say that even if the entire bottom box was brood, you'd have to do an awful lot of feeding to fill up those upper 2 boxes solid with, well, fake honey. And you're going to notice it and stop feeding probably a long time before that happens.
You know,
So-
Dick, I've known a number of people that have overfed their bees. They
Yeah,
have
yeah.
been such good parents to their bees that their bees just grew and grew and grew until they left.
Yeah. So it's one of those questions where when do I stop feeding my bees? And the answer is, well, there's 2 answers. The obvious one is it depends. And the other one is when they have enough. So, nothing beats looking for finding out, or lifting the back of the hive, or doing both, so that when you lift the back of the hive, it feels like such and such. And then you look into the top boxes and see, well, it feels like such and such. It looks like so and so. And then you train your brain to know what's going on inside by what it feels like outside.
Although I think if I had a choice, I'd rather my bees do really well and reproduce by swarming than die of starvation.
Yeah, I err on the side of plenty, especially, you never know how long it's going to shut down. The weather might get bad. We had a pretty rainy spring, right? Past year. So yeah,
Yeah, it
rainy
was,
spring, and they just don't go
Hardly
out.
any rain in January and February, and everybody thought, oh, it's gonna swarm, and then it changed in April, all of a sudden it started raining again.
Yeah,
Yeah.
then it got cold.
Yeah,
So if you do, especially if I don't know if anybody else does this pull scale thing, but boy, it really works for me, because you can just put the numbers week after week and see a trend, and know when to do something. I'm kind of recommending it. I mean, you need a pull scale to see if you're overweight at the airport anyways.
Right, like a luggage scale.
Yeah, or just get one of those spring scales at a yard scale or an old junk shop and use that. One
Thank
that
you.
goes to 50 pounds.
Dick, you convinced me. I think I'm gonna try that.
Yeah. Yeah, you probably have
Just
an old
go behind
antique
the
in your
hives
place. You
and
got
lift
old
them up
cars,
and
you
weigh 'em.
probably
I'm
got
gonna
old
try it.
scales too.
I think you sold me on that idea.
Yeah, and if you wanted, you could do other experiments. Like you need a pretty hefty one and a pretty strong arm to lift it when it's got honey supers on. But you could do what Eric was thinking about. Well, are they gathering any honey between now and, say, November? Are they accumulating and filling up? What's the trend? It's easy to go, just hook your hive in the back and read a number. I'm going to do it this year. I'm going to start and just keep.
Yeah, it's good to put a little money and get a good scale.
Yeah, I mean, what do
one
they
that, like,
cost?
once
30
you
or
hit
40
the
bucks.
weight, it freezes and you can read it, and it's, so this is the first year that I've done Langstroth all year. I'm going to do Langstroth through the winter, so I can actually weigh my colonies. So I'm looking forward to that.
Mhm.
Well, we want to know what kind of scale you have.
And what I have,
Yeah, Eric.
I don't remember, but it was a good one.
Yeah. I can tell you what kind I have. I have fish scales. And I'm not making a pun because actually a good place to find these is with the places that supply fishermen, because
The
they're always
fisherman's
wanting to
mag.
weigh their fish. So they have fish scales.
Well, I got one at TJ Maxx for weighing luggage.
Yeah.
Well, we're getting on 8 o'clock. Any more questions about this? Getting your hives ready for winter? Well, thank you so much, Dick.
Okay, you're welcome. We
That was wonderful.
wish success for all of you. And we're, spring will come. I mean, actually, winter isn't here yet, but the signs are about.
Yep.
Thank you, Dick.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Dick.
Dick. Thank
You're
you.
welcome. Thank you, everybody. Thanks to Steve Satong. Steve was, many of you don't know him, but he was an early helper teacher for the B class. He set up the slideshow system, the Google stuff, the Google Slides stuff, taught me how to do it, and saved our asses for this show because the login was through his name still, and it unlogged itself from my computer and Janine's computer, and we were faced with like a week and a half to go, and can't get into Google, can't log into the special site that he set up. So he
Just a
kind of
little
coached.
bit of stress.
Yeah, a little bit of stress. We knew he'd come through, and he